Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our open forum. And before we get started, I just thought I'd give you a brief overview of how this open forum will play out. At the conclusion of our presentation, there will be a question and answer session. There are 2 microphones, one by each set of the steps up front, from which you can pose your question. For those of you listening remotely, you can submit your question from the Efficiency and Transformation page off the UNI homepage, and we will pose your question to the panel. If some of you would prefer not to pose your question personally, there are also note cards and pencils following the steps at the end of the dress circle section from which you can submit a question, and either myself or Scott Kettleson will pose that question to the panel. We'll also use the note cards and pencils if we end up not having enough time to get through everybody's question, but we'll address that at the end of the session. If there are a number of people waiting to ask questions, I ask that you limit your question to no more than 1 with a single follow-up so we can get through as many questions as possible. And as a reminder to the media, this public forum is primarily for the UNI campus community. At the conclusion of the open forum, there will be press availability in Davis Hall, at which time your questions will be addressed. Thank you again for attending, and I'll now turn it over to President Rude.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. My part is brief. Appreciate you attending. I appreciate you participating again in this ongoing study. I want to bring you greetings and thank yous from Deloitte. Our partners in Deloitte can't thank you enough for your participation, your ongoing questions, your ongoing input. They very much appreciate it and know that if we're going to become efficient and effective, that it's going to be a partnership. So we want to make sure that you're aware of their appreciation of all your hard work. Having said that, it's now my pleasure to introduce Regent Larry McKibben, who is chairing this task force, for his remarks. Larry.
I'm scared to death to touch this thing. It's too tall for me. Well, good afternoon and welcome, everyone. We certainly appreciate having you join us today. President Rude, thanks for your kind comments, and thanks for UNI hosting this event today. I can tell you, and I have the right color tie on today, as an alum, it's always a pleasure to be back to my home university. It has great memories and has a lot to do with, as it does with graduates every year from this university, the success in our careers in our lifetime. I'd also like to, before I get into my fixed comments here, I'd like to thank the faculty, the staff, the students, the administration for all of the hard work you did this winter and spring in the legislative process, working for funding for UNI, making it clear that UNI needed the funding to keep its quality up at the university. And you did a fantastic job, and I'm sure there are a number of people here that were active in that process, and I can't thank you enough because we got the additional funding and we kept tuition flat. So those are great things for this university. So as a committee and as a Board of Regents, we're very happy to be back at UNI for our second town hall meeting, this time with the Phase 1 findings of the Regents and in the TEIR efficiency study. This is our first step in a second series of town hall meetings, which will be on each campus, UNI, Iowa State, and the University of Iowa, going through the Phase 2 findings by Deloitte. I would like to thank all of you today for listening, for being part of the process at the University of Northern Iowa. I know that there were a lot of folks here, a lot of questions asked, a lot of data prepared, and it was very important that you and I participated, and from everything I heard, you have participated well and really contributed to this process. The winner at the end of the day is going to be UNI. And I can't overstate the importance of this process. It's critical to our universities in the state of Iowa, crucial to our state, and critical to our future. Here in Iowa and throughout the United States, higher education is facing severe economic constraints that require our universities to transform their organizations and to provide solutions to students who too often take too long to graduate and take home too much debt. As I stated at UNI a few months ago, the status quo is unsustainable and unacceptable if we're to maintain an uncompromising standard of academic excellence, which we have come to be used to at the University of Northern Iowa and at all the Regents universities. So we adopted a highly comprehensive effort that is not possible without your insights and cooperation. We appreciate your continued involvement. I'd also like to thank Kelly Flagey and Scott Kettleson, the representatives at the university here, and of course President Rood for his involvement. I'd also like to thank the Deloitte team for all of the work and effort that they've put in. I've been impressed with their professionalism and expertise, and you will hear that today. In preparation for the current round of town hall meetings, the board last week released a high-level summary of the Deloitte findings in the first phase. It includes a list of ideas identified by Deloitte for more analysis, and that they are going to talk about today. We're going to hear the details of those opportunities in the areas that they want to spend time on. We're joined today by Rick Ferraro and Virginia Frazier and several other representatives of the Deloitte team who have been working with many of you in developing these findings. But before I turn to Deloitte, I know many folks, in particular our friends in the media, have been interested in seeing Deloitte's full Phase 1 update. I indicated at our board meeting 2 weeks ago our plan to release the additional Phase 1 details and cost information was by July 4th. This was to ensure that we allowed sufficient time for the universities to review this very comprehensive Phase 1 update before we released it publicly. We felt that this was a reasonable step as the universities prepare for Phase 2. And I can tell you from the beginning of this process, it was our committee and the Board of Regents' desire that this was a bottom-up process, not a top-down process, and that was our emphasis from day one. However, given the media interest and other folks' interest in seeing numbers and dollars and cents, you're going to get 97 pages of it online today after we finish this meeting of all of the things that we looked at. And understand that this was we asked Deloitte to give us a broad analysis, and that's what they did. So go to regents.iowa.gov, and you'll see it following the town hall meeting day. There'll be a 97-page work paper there. And although these savings estimates are very preliminary, the Deloitte team has created initial estimates for the individual areas, which will be further analyzed in Phase 2. And that's the process we begin today with our visit to UNI. The presentation is going to be today in aggregate, covering all 3 of the Regents' universities. Across all the identified administrative areas, the team estimates potential savings of $30 million to $80 million annually once they're fully implemented. And again, our Deloitte folks will talk about that process. When this process is complete and the savings are realized, we will have the opportunity to strengthen and transform all 3 of our Regents' universities. The reinvestment of the money is going to be in the individual campuses, and I said that before, and I said it the first time that I was here. These dollars come back into this campus. The savings and the repurposing of the money comes back here. It benefits the programs, it benefits our campuses, and most importantly, it benefits the students and families in the state of Iowa. While we're still in the very early stages of this study, it's clear that we are now on a path to better evaluate our processes and determine ways to operate more effectively and efficiently on each campus. And here is what I am most proud of as a UNI alum. With this TEIR study, we have learned that we have dedicated faculty and staff. And I want to repeat that again. We have dedicated faculty and staff. We have highly engaged and motivated students. And I can tell you at every Regents meeting, we have a breakfast with student leaders. And again, everyone here ought to be very proud of the student leaders and the student government at this university. And the clear focus of the mission of this university, we hear all the time, and Deloitte heard all the time. With the important information from this study and the potential reinvestment of $30 million to $80 million a year, we will enable our institutions to grow in a manner that keeps them true to academic excellence for years to come and strengthens our state's impressive legacy of higher education. And again, in concluding, I thank you all for coming. We look forward to the questions that will follow. And at this point in time, I'd like to introduce Rick Ferraro, the director of Deloitte, for carrying on the rest of the process today. So again, thank you for coming.
President Rude, Regents, members of the UNI community, invited guests, it's just great to be back here in Cedar Falls. I see some familiar faces in the audience. We've had a good process. Just as a general comment, we did ask each of the 3 universities to do an awful lot of work in a short amount of time. We asked for a lot of data about a lot of things, and not just faculty, staff, students participated, cleared their calendars, made themselves available to us, and for that I'd like to ask my team members to express our appreciation for the efforts of everyone at all 3 universities for us to get to this point. So thank you very much. We have a lot of material to cover today. I'm going to be as quick as I can to set a little context. I want to just indicate our intent to go through this so that we leave time at the end for some questions. If this works, we can go to the next page. There we go. So just a little bit about our topics today. As you can see, we have some of our managers who led the individual components of our team here today. And later on, you're going to hear from each of them about the areas that they looked at, the things that they analyzed, how they reached their conclusions, and a little bit about what still remains, because there's no decisions being made today. The only decision is to continue to look at 12 different areas in more detail on the admin side, and 5 areas in more detail on the academic side. So you hear a little bit more from them. One of our team leads is not here today due to a schedule conflict, and will be a little bit of sharing, but we'll make sure we cover that topic as well. And I'm going to cover the overall timeline so you have a sense of where we are exactly in the process. We're still quite early, and that's why these numbers, the $30 to $80 million range, is so large, is because at this point in time, we don't know. We have a lot more analysis to do. We have a lot of alternatives to investigate. We need to talk to people who deal with the work day to day and work with them to come up with the best joint solutions that make sense. And we have to go through a process that takes time, and that takes time of interaction with people on all campuses to do that. So, and then after me, Virginia will give us a little bit more about what we found in phase 1, and then we'll hear from the team leads. So let me go through the review of where we are on the 3-phase approach. So this is a slide I used at the very first town hall. And as you might recall, there's 3 phases across the top: benchmarking and baselining, which is to really understand how you operate, what your costs really are, and investigate each area. So we pretty much looked at every aspect of university operations with the exception of graduate level activities, but pretty much across the entire university operation, and we also excluded the hospital. And as you can see, when you move from one of these phases to another, pretty soon we're going to start seeing that certain topics can move faster than other topics, and it's now going to start to get complex to keep track of where we are, because we're not going to go through lockstep, go do 10 steps, stop and and report out. What will happen is that when it makes sense to proceed into implementation, it will be announced, there will be discussions, and the idea is to move forward into implementation so that the savings and the benefits can be reaped at that time. Okay? So notice that we are at the end of phase 1. Phase 2 is more analysis. That's all it is. And so, and you'll see in the report tonight that comes out, that Deloitte has delivered, that we identified 175 distinctly different opportunities. The great majority of them are across all 3 institutions. The great majority of them. Of those, only 63 are directly related to efficiency. And of those, the board committee has chosen to move forward with only 12 of them, which you'll hear about today in more detail. Plenty of detail with numbers associated, estimated savings for each of them. In addition, we found 22 opportunities related to revenue improvement, which is a good story. It's nice to have that opportunity, isn't it? And then in addition, we found 90 opportunities that could be labeled effectiveness related. So this is improving service levels. This is fulfilling the mission of the universities in a better way. This is being more competitive in the marketplace for students and faculty. These are big upside improvement opportunities. So I'm personally very excited about what we have found, because we can actually do something significant with your cooperation and involvement, and come to solutions that make the most sense by looking at alternatives and evaluating them together and taking the time to do that, that we will all move forward together. And that's a prime reason why the academic area has been pushed to start in fall in earnest, and simply delayed. It was done at the request of the faculty at each of the 3 universities, and so we've done that. We were on an original timeline that was shorter than that, and the involvement of the effort would have suffered. So just to give a sense of that, think of how much we can improve the effectiveness of Iowa's universities and really move towards that vision of having it be a beacon of higher education in the Midwest. And I think that we'll see that together, you'll see that these things really provide some significant opportunity there. Now, just to be clear, what is the output of phase 2? We're going to talk about business cases. And that's kind of a management term, if you will, to just prove that with some deeper facts and some numbers, that it's worth moving forward to implement an opportunity. So in the business case, these will include the estimated costs of putting in place a new solution, or doing it a different way, or providing training to people to do it a different way, whatever that might be, but all the costs it takes before you actually do it a different way, and to improve the effectiveness or the efficiency of that, or produce that revenue you're looking for. It identifies all of the implementation requirements and steps that it takes to get that done, and to train the people or whatever you're doing to actually be able to operate in the new way. It lays out all of those key activities. It lays out the risks associated with making any of those changes along the way. If you don't have those elements, you don't have a solid business case. In addition, we're going to develop an implementation roadmap. And that means we're going to take 12 opportunity areas and develop a map that lays out the timing and relationship between doing 12 things simultaneously over time, how long each takes, and to have a guide with a path for the path going forward that's very practical, very tactical, and shows the dependency between one or more of those activities. If opportunity can't proceed until Opportunity 3 can proceed until Opportunity 2 is done. That's a dependency we need to account for and put into the timeline. And that's the idea of laying that out so it's actually a doable path rather than taking on way too many ideas all at once. So we're going to be developing all of that, and those will come out at the end of phase 2. And phase 2, unfortunately, to make it a little bit more complex, has 2 different timelines, which I'll talk about in a second. Before I go there, I want to talk about the green bar at the bottom of the top of the page. If we don't have organizational engagement where we can interact with you, share ideas, hear your reactions, explore new ideas, if we can't do that, we aren't going to come to the best solution that makes the most sense for any university or across the system. So we look forward to that, and we're very thankful for it. One too many, I think. Okay, so here is just an outline of the timing, and it might be a little bit small to read, but there's 3 elements to this. The first one there is for the academic opportunities. There's 12 opportunities on that yellow line. The dots you see on there are simply representing meetings, for example, doing meetings at the campuses, or in the case of later on, a series of workshops. So these are all laid out, and the idea is that in phase 2, we will look at the 12 opportunities related to the admin side, and we will reach conclusion on those in about the middle of August is what that time frame shows. There's one area that we expect may emerge before that 12-week period is over, and that relates to sourcing and procurement. And our first team lead to talk about that will lay that out. It could be that you can possibly go into negotiating new contracts with vendors, or moving to implementation where you start those actions to change the way you contract things to produce some results, and it may be able to move to implementation probably the first thing out of the blocks compared to the others of the 12. I think the other 11 will probably wait till we'll need full time to get through all the way through August to be able to report out on that. That's our anticipation at this point. If it changes significantly, we'll let you know. And then you can see the academic is in yellow. Those are 5 opportunities. You'll hear from the folks working on that. And you can see the multiple green dots out there, or dots on the green line. Those are structured workshops with uniquely developed faculty groups to address specific academic opportunities and to go work through those. And then lastly is implementation. So to be correct, it could be that the green bar in the very bottom related to implementation may slide just a little bit to the left, but just for sourcing and procurement. Everything else, nothing is going to start being implemented until post mid-August at the earliest, would be our current projection. So I wanted to just lay that out so you have a sense of where we are in the process. And yes, we have to balance here speed with accuracy and appropriate involvement and getting input from faculty. And so if you wait too long, the savings don't accrue, or the revenue won't materialize if you don't move fast. So there's a pressure to move fast. There's an equal pressure to work together, to come to exchange information, look at some alternatives, evaluate them, maybe adjust them, and come to the best solution. Those two are the balancing forces we need to work through, and we're going to be juggling against as we proceed. I'd like now to introduce my colleague, Virginia Frazier, who's the day-to-day project manager for this engagement. She'll give you an overview of phase 1. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Virginia Frazier. I'm the project manager for TEIR, and it's great to be back on UNI's campus. Thank you for having us. I'm going to go through my remarks quickly because we have some more exciting material to share with you as we go through all of the updates from our leads today, so I want to make sure to leave time for that. First off, I want to point out a couple of things about phase 1 that are important to keep in mind. This was a rigorous and inclusive process of interview sessions, one-on-one meetings, group meetings, benchmarking, and town hall meetings. This included over 390 interviews with 700 interviewees and a round of town hall meetings that we conducted at each campus prior to the end of phase 1. We also received quite a bit of feedback on our websites as well that we also looked through in detail as we developed our opportunities. We developed our opportunities based on these inputs, on data analysis, looking at over 1,500 pieces of material that came in through the beginning of this process, and looked at benchmarks and past project experience. And as we looked at these opportunities as we moved through phase 1, we started to narrow those opportunities into areas of business cases that looked to be the most promising for phase 2. So we took what Rick mentioned as 175 opportunities, narrowed those down to the 17 that we're going to go through with you today. And on the next slide, from these opportunities, you can see that we identified a number of common themes across the 3 universities. We talked a little bit about the strengths, the incredibly talented faculty and staff, motivated students, the strong desire to use resources efficiently, and to always be looking for the next way to improve. We saw this very consistently across all 3 universities. We also saw some challenges that each of the 3 universities faces as well. And these challenges that are listed up here, from some limited cross-university collaboration to the number of silos across the university campuses and among the universities, and the high amount of complexity across the 3 schools, indicate something that's very common within higher education, which is that as universities and colleges grow over time and organically develop in response to the needs of faculty, staff, and students, this point in time is always a healthy one, where universities look at their processes and their policies and look at ways of becoming even more efficient on a bigger scale. And this is something that we feel is an important step that the regents are taking right now. We will get into more specifics of some of the strengths and challenges of these individual areas as our leads go through these topics today. On the next slide, you can see the areas that we looked at in phase 1. These areas have been communicated to you in previous town halls and in some of the communications that we've done online and in other various ways. But one thing I'd like you to notice is that not all of these areas are being built into business cases in phase 2. We moved from these 12 initial areas that we were looking at into 8 areas that comprise the focus for phase 2. The reason is because in those 8 areas, we identified those 17 business cases we'll talk about today that we think hold the most promise. That doesn't mean that the other opportunities don't hold promise as well, but we wanted to narrow the focus for this next phase to do a more detailed and comprehensive analysis to inform some of the board's decision-making going forward when they start to look at implementation. In this next slide, you can see that the opportunities identified for phase 1 are broken into those 8 areas that I mentioned. We have sourcing and procurement, finance, human resources, academic programs, facilities management, strategic space utilization, information technology, and student services. Several of these areas contain more than one business case, others have just one. But in most of these areas, as Rick said, these business cases apply to all 3 universities. And we're going to be talking about that right now to give you a better sense of what these areas contain and what the business case topics will be during phase 2. And I want to assure you that as you look at the report that's coming out later today, you'll also have access to these slides. So although we're going through some of these materials quickly right now, you'll have plenty of time to reference them later and look at them on your own to read through some details. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to our sourcing and procurement lead, Gary Sutton, who's going to talk about the business case in his area.
So as Virginia mentioned, my name is Gary Sutton, and I am the Deloitte team member who's responsible for the assessment of the procurement function. And the procurement functions are responsible for buying all of the goods and services on behalf of the respective universities. And there really are 2 main activities performed by the people within the procurement organizations. They negotiate contracts with vendors and place orders with those vendors. The scope of the phase 1 activity was to do the following: to analyze all of the expenditures for goods and services across each of the universities. And in the course of accomplishing that, we analyzed over $2 billion worth of expenditures and analyzed more than 1 million transaction lines. We also analyzed the structure of the procurement organizations, and we analyzed the processes that are used by all of the procurement organizations to negotiate with vendors and place orders with those vendors. Our key observations during the phase 1 assessment included the following. And the observations included both strengths as well as weaknesses or opportunities. The strengths, some of which we've heard earlier or that were alluded to earlier, the organizations collaborate and look for opportunities to negotiate contracts that benefit all three universities. Leadership embraces the idea of continuous improvement of its processes for negotiating and placing orders with vendors. And on the opportunity side, although some savings have been negotiated with vendors, there still appears to be an opportunity for incremental savings. And so when compared to some of the higher education and commercial benchmarks, as well as when compared to some Deloitte benchmarks from previous client experiences, based on those benchmarks, there appears to be an incremental opportunity to save 16 to 40 million additional dollars. It's important to note that these are benchmarks from higher education and from the, as well as from the commercial practices, and some of the benchmarks that we use come from one of the more prominent procurement trade groups, the Center for Advanced Procurement Studies. We also observed that when compared to these same benchmarks, there appears to be an underinvestment in the personnel resources and technology needed to capture and retain these higher levels of savings. And so during phase 2, we will determine whether the savings opportunities that were identified as a part of phase 1 are valid and worth pursuing during an implementation phase. And finally, if those savings do prove to be valid, we will be developing an implementation timeline for realizing those savings. And with that, I would like to introduce our next functional lead, Emily.
Thanks, Gary. My name's Emily Todd. I'm going to be talking about finance and human resources today. Let's see if I can just, here we go. Okay. Finance, okay. We're on the right slide now. So I'll talk first about the outputs from the finance analysis that was done in phase 1. When we think about finance, we were looking at key transactional areas like accounts payable, treasury, budgeting, travel and expense processing, areas of financial management that really permeate the whole institution. Some clear strengths emerged during this analysis. I think the first one was that there are really dedicated finance staff across all 3 institutions who really see the value in the work and the services they provide to support the mission and the vision of each institution. We also saw a high degree of collaboration between finance staff, not only at each institution, but across institutions as well, which was really great to see. And we also saw a culture of continuous process improvement where people were constantly going back and seeing how can we improve the customer experience, processes, procedures to make life easier for everyone across campus. So there were some great strengths to see. Some of the challenges we observed across all 3 organizations were the decentralized organizational structure of how finance work is executed. There's a lot of work that has to happen at the department level, and oftentimes various administrative staff need to be involved in multiple areas. There's also a need for investment in technology in certain areas. At each institution, we saw that some key processes were still being operated on paper, which obviously isn't ideal. So in terms of the phase 2 business case that we're going to be exploring for finance in further detail, we're going to be looking at how finance transactions are executed at the department level to determine if there's a way to improve the service delivery model, to improve service, increase turnaround times, and reduce compliance risk. We think this is a good opportunity to look at because we heard from multiple staff members during the Phase 1 analysis that they often feel overwhelmed with the number of finance areas that they need to be involved in, keeping up with the latest technology, compliance regulations, and internal policies and procedures. We also heard from central finance staff that the number of folks that are involved often creates errors that require additional amount of auditing and back and forth between groups. So we think by looking at how work is executed currently and to see whether it can be improved would have a lot of qualitative benefits, like improving folks' job satisfaction, reducing the amount of compliance errors or turnaround times for certain procedures. We also estimate that there's a potential for $1 to $5 million in savings due to the decrease in the administrative burden and streamlining some of these processes. And that's something we will be reviewing in more detail in Phase 2 to determine what that opportunity looks like at a more detailed level. So I'll turn to HR. So HR obviously looks at all the major areas related to employment, so recruitment, hiring and retention, personnel data management, payroll, benefits administration. We looked at all these areas during Phase 1, and I think some key strengths and challenges emerged here as well. High degree of collaboration with HR staff, which is great to see. We also saw high utilization of staff, so HR staff really willing to take on new roles and responsibilities to meet new and emerging constituent needs, whether that be on at an ad hoc or ongoing basis. So that was really a positive thing. We also saw that there's been recent investments in automation and workflow and self-service capability for some key HR areas, which I think is a positive to note across the 3 institutions as well. Some of the challenges we observed were an inefficient sort of service delivery model in terms of the work breakdown between central HR staff and department level staff. Customers and faculty often cited confusion in terms of who they're supposed to contact, unclear roles and responsibilities between those 2 groups. We also saw that there's often unclear policies and procedures in place, so staff often feeling confused about where to go for the right information. We also saw some IT resource constraints across the 3 institutions. Each university, I think, has some HR technology needs that are in queue, and wanting to see those move forward was a challenge as well. So in terms of Phase 2, what we're going to be looking at in more detail, there's 2 areas in HR. The first one is looking at reviewing the breakdown of transactional effort between central HR staff and work happening out of the departments to determine the optimal breakdown of work and clarify roles and responsibilities to improve the customer experience. It was noted during Phase 1 that a lot of customers felt that each HR function at each institution had a lot of great strengths, but that there were also best practices that could be leveraged across the 3 institutions. We want to look at what's the optimal way to structure this work. So in addition to kind of improving the customer experience, we hope that some of the qualitative outcomes of this analysis would be increased compliance, faster turnaround times on transaction, better job satisfaction, similar to finance. We also estimate that there's a potential for $1 to $3 million in savings due to the reduced administrative burden of some of these processes by improving them. And we'll be reviewing that during Phase 2 to determine what that breakdown will look like. The second area is around the recruitment process for professional and scientific staff. This is a more qualitative opportunity. It was noted in Phase 1 that a lot of staff feel frustration around how long it takes to fill certain positions. So we're going to review the processes across the 3 institutions to determine whether there's adjustments that can be made so that we're attracting qualified applicants and getting them in the door as quickly as possible, while still being compliant with state and federal regulations. So with that, I will hand it over to Gayla, who's going to talk about academic programs. Thanks.
You'll notice Emily said she'd turn it over to Gayla. The reason is I have the most impossible name in Iowa. My name is Gayla Krich-Hartsoe. You can call me Gayla. I am president of KH Consulting Group, And Deloitte had our team really focus on the academic programs. Academic programs, would I get any argument if I said they are core to why a university exists? How many agree? So one of the things that's very critical when we look at academic programs is to make sure that we sustain and build on the strengths, the decades of hard work that have been put into building these programs as we go forward. So what I have produced, and our team has worked very hard on this, is really to develop a strategy map to show to you the complexities of when we look at academic programs and to outline for you in terms of what we see as the strengths, the challenges, and how we want to sort of move forward as we go into phase 2, because this is a very complex area. We've defined as an aspirational goal to basically produce excellent and affordable higher education as an Iowa asset to the world. And key to all of this is clearly student success. And you've heard the Deloitte team already talk about how impressed we are with your students. Your students are very engaged. When you look at the outstanding student outcomes column, you should be all proud of your students in terms of job placement rates a year after graduation, what they're doing in terms of their post-secondary graduation pursuits, and that the legacy that you and I and the other universities have for the state are very powerful. We looked at the high quality, high value programs, and of course one of the issues which Larry raised earlier is time to degree. 50% or fewer of the students complete their degrees in 4 years, which adds to student debt. If we move over to the other end in terms of student success, the other key factor is student access. And in many ways, you have been very effective in serving what we would call a traditional student population, those graduating from high school and moving straight into the university. You've been working hard to integrate the community college transfer students and trying to make more seamless their skill levels so that they can move into your academic programs. The list goes on in terms of veterans, out-of-state, international students. The one area that we saw being underserved was really in the area of non-traditional students. If you look at the demographics at all three, very robust enrollments up to between 18 and 24, another dip, increase around 26 to 28, 29 for the veterans returning, and then it pretty much drops off after age 30. Typically, non-traditional learners over age 30 are working, they have other complexities, and distance education is generally the key means for them to access higher education. Under the next row, you're going to see, is really delivered by faculty. How many faculty are here, by the way? Just so you have an idea of the audience. So faculty, I mean, you're critical for delivering these academic programs, right? Along with focused, impactful research, and at UNI, much of that's applied research, experimental research, sort of real world. You actively engage your undergraduates actually in research endeavors, which helps them to achieve these good job placement rates and postgraduate rates. You also have a long tradition, starting out as a normal university in higher education or teacher education, and then expanding into your other colleges. But if you look at the box on the left, when we talk about the impactful curriculum and instruction, we saw some opportunities here. It does take sometimes as long as 18 months to 2 years to get new programs through. There's not as robust sharing of what are effective pedagogical approaches. And again, we saw other great opportunities where colleges are collaborating within the colleges and across the colleges. So these are also very important building blocks. Under organizational excellence, we have the programs are linked to student needs and postgraduate opportunities, so that makes sense, but we have to make sure that happens in order to deliver outstanding student outcomes. And then you'll see there's a whole list of opportunities around what we would call strong enrollment management. And this is really looking at how you sequence courses, how large your departments are, how you align them against the kinds of curriculum you're delivering to the students. On the far right, you'll see empirically based decision making. We truly would like to see an even more robust use of data to make decisions going forward. And that involves, you have an institutional research office, it's looking at data within your university and also looking at data across the universities. The bottom line I had to put up there because the question is always how will we make sure we can fiscally deliver all this? And so you'll see a number of areas there that really talks about making sure that we have sufficient revenues in order to deliver on the education. And similarly for the research areas. Now, you may wonder, how does this all tie together? Well, you're going to see there are 3 opportunities that we're going to be focusing on when we go forward, and they're huge. One is distance education, and so that's up in that right-hand box, and the board committee was interested in that for 2 reasons. One, it will help the non-traditional students to have access, and 2, it's going to generate revenues. Anyone against generating revenues as an option for the universities? Did anyone see what happened with Starbucks today? Starbucks just announced that any of their employees, they will pay to get a distance education degree through Arizona State University. And I heard that and I thought, wow, wouldn't that be great if that was Iowa? I mean, so that's why that is an important area to look at. Great things are happening, they've been bottom up. We feel that we need to look at it at a more system-wide level and to look at opportunities to generate revenue, student access, sharing across the university, sharing of expenses and the revenues. The other opportunity you're going to see is that empirically based decision making, the need for really good, reliable data when we sit down and look at the various programs. And the third opportunity, and I'm sort of going through these in reverse order, is strengthen academic programs to achieve maximum competitiveness. I wanted to leave this strategy map up when I came to this one because this is huge. This is not a done deal in any way. Strengthen academic programs to achieve maximum competitiveness. When you think about that kind of analysis that we have to do in the fall, it's going to touch upon many areas of the strategy map. It's going to touch upon the student success factors in terms of high quality, high value, getting students through in 4 years or 5 years, making sure that the students, when they transfer in, can be successful coming from the community colleges, ensuring that we're using good enrollment management principles, and the list goes on. So this is the list of the opportunities. And again, you'll see they track back to the strategy map, but they're still very broad in scope. The reason I wanted to mention the breadth is because we do need faculty involvement come fall. This summer, I'm going to be working with the universities to figure out the best way to engage the faculty. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with the Faculty Senate Leadership, Faculty Guild. I see Joe down here at the front. Also meeting with the deans to talk about what would be the best way to go forward, particularly in terms of strengthening the academic programs. Come fall, what we'd like to do, because we've been gathering consistent data across the universities, is to have a large faculty kickoff so we can really workshop a lot of the ideas. We'll be forming work groups, so think about if you're interested in being involved. They typically will meet every other week starting in September. They're about 2 hours long. We have a KHT member who facilitates each meeting, prepares the materials in between the meetings, and we'll be working together collaboratively to develop the business cases. The target is to have them done by early December to then share within the university and with the board committee. And I think that's the highlight. So Pankaj is next on facilities.
So hi, I've met a number of you before. I'm Pankaj Agarwal, and my team worked on facilities management and auxiliaries. So facilities, as you all know, includes functions such as cleaning, maintenance, snow removal, landscaping, functions like that, and many others. We also worked on auxiliaries, and auxiliaries include residence, dining, athletics, utilities, student unions, parking, transportation, performing arts centers, and a few other functions. So our findings were consistent with some of what's been discussed already, that there's a clear understanding in each department of the mission of each institution and what the department is doing to support that mission. There's also a strong desire to effectively use the university resources. However, we found that there's limited cross-university collaboration across the Iowa universities. There's also some redundancy within the institutions, such as the university has a central facilities management department, and yet there are other facilities employees that are seen within other groups, such as student unions, with residents, and dining. But the overall, what stood out for us was the overall dedication and commitment of the staff to supporting students, to supporting their studies, and making sure that they graduate. So we developed do I point this forward or do I point it at the screen? Okay, there we go. So I'm going to talk about these two business cases that we are going to be developing. So the first one is about reducing utilities and operational costs by limiting the use of classroom buildings during evenings, the summer, and holiday periods. So presently, what's happening is that evening classes, summer programs are spread out in multiple facilities across the campuses. And this requires all the buildings having to remain open, having to remain air-conditioned or heated, as the case may be, and also the need for them to be cleaned and maintained. So we are building a business case for consolidating all evening and summer classes in a few buildings and then limiting the use of the other buildings in order to allow for savings in the consumption of energy and also to provide opportunities for required renovation and repair, which might require closing down these buildings. The second opportunity that we are developing a business case for is to reduce, again, it's related to expensive energy consumption. It's about reducing energy consumption by investing in energy management initiatives. So as we've all seen, energy prices have gone up 4 to 5-fold in the last 10 to 15 years. And we are building a business case for investing in energy management initiatives with short payback periods. Some examples of these are things like replacing regular light bulbs with LED light bulbs, sensor switches that sense and turn off lights because there's enough daylight, or switches that detect that there's nobody in the room, so therefore they turn off those lights. So presently, each initiative is expected to save $1 million to $1.5 million in the consumption of energy, but this will be greatly refined in phase 2 during our analysis. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Gayla. Thank you.
I'm going to be sharing with you an area that was covered by Tom Shaver's group at Astra out of Kansas City. They have worked with over 500 colleges and universities, and their specialty is really looking at class schedules and facility utilization. So you'll see there's some overlap where I talked to you about academic programs, you just heard about facilities, and this is where the two come together. And in looking at the area, it made sense that we really involve Ad Astra when we look at academic programs. So what do we mean by strategic scheduling and space utilization? We really are looking at how you allocate faculty with the academic space available and making sure that we create a class schedule that meets student needs so that they can get through their programs in a time-efficient way. At the same time, we have to make sure that we're using our space in a very efficient way and to the maximum to avoid building additional buildings if we have adequate space on campus to handle it. I know that Tom was very pleased with the people he worked with because everyone works very hard to come up with a very optimal schedule and to use the facilities in a robust way. But when they did benchmark the universities, the rating was basically low to moderate levels of faculty and space utilization opportunities, which is why they felt this was an area worth looking at in greater depth. They too will be waiting till fall. When we do our working groups in the academic program areas, we'll have Ad Astra come to actually go through all the data. You can look at it. We can, if you're on those working groups, and we can explore what are the greatest opportunities. You'll see them listed on this slide. They're around improving the utilization of the class space and scheduling, as well as optimal allocation of faculty into that space. I wanted to give you just sort of a general feeling about what they look at when we talk about optimal utilization. Of faculty, you know there are enrollment caps. So the goal is to have what's called like a balanced portfolio. And they set as a threshold about 40%. And that means looking at 90%, making sure if something's over-enrolled. And Ad Astra defines over-enrolled classes which are at 90% or higher. They also want to be sure that classes are not under-enrolled, and that's when they're at 70% or less. And so they'll be sharing this kind of data. We'll be looking at it by college, by program, and again, it'll be input in terms of are we delivering our courses and programs in the most efficient way possible. One final note on this is what I call prime time. I know students like to sleep in. I know faculty are very much aware that the prime times to teach traditional students is during the day between 10 and 4. So again, that's critical time to look at in terms of what courses need to be offered in that block and what other kinds of courses could be sequenced to meet other traditional student needs. And with that, I will turn it to Shomik, who will talk to you about IT.
Thank you, Gayla. Does that work? Okay. So my name is Shamik Saha, and I'm the Deloitte lead for the Information Technology Workstream. We commonly abbreviate that as IT. In terms of IT, this function basically consists of the different teams that develop and maintain academic and administrative systems that support all of the three universities. It also provides infrastructure services like network communications, data center operations, server support, help desk services, and classroom technology support. So in terms of the operating structure, the way IT is structured, it consists of a central ITS team at each university, which is also supported by over 40 distributed IT teams that support services at the individual departments and the colleges. So in our review of the IT function in phase 1, we found a number of positives within the IT function, including their committed leaders, clearly the high level of IT skills, a genuine spirit of continuous improvement, and robust technology infrastructure like world-class data centers. We also noticed a few challenges, like the limited visibility of total IT spend across the universities, the need to determine the right balance between central and distributed support services, and the potential to enhance architecture discipline. For instance, we saw many redundant systems and over 60 technology data closets, for instance. So for phase 2, there are specifically 4 business cases under consideration that you see on the screen in front of you. The first one on top is focused on the nature of distributed technology services, and will explore the potential for increasing collaboration within the overall IT function so that there's a more clear understanding of how services can be delivered effectively, whether centrally or in a more distributed manner. The second business case deals with exploring service delivery models for the central ITS function, including looking at whether the level of IT services could be adjusted to become more cost effective or be delivered using flexible staffing models. So together we estimate that these 2 business cases, the first top 2, could potentially lead to savings of roughly $8 to $16 million annually. The next 2 business cases deal more with the application of advanced technology as a means to lower the cost of technology operations. So the third business case is focused on reviewing the potential to streamline the systems landscape. There are thousands of systems in operation today, and some of them appear to be duplicative. So identifying such systems and reducing duplication over the long run can provide savings in terms of lower licensing costs, lower vendor costs, application development costs, and lowering storage and data costs as well. The final business case deals with the use of innovative technologies like voice over IP or virtual desktops, which could potentially lower the cost of desktops and communications costs. So the last two business cases we estimate have potential to unlock somewhere between $3 and $11 million annually. We think there's an opportunity in IT due to our preliminary analysis, which shows that similar IT services like server management or desktop management were being provided by several IT teams across the universities. And also, as I mentioned, we found areas of duplication of systems. We also saw good initial reactions to isolated cases of use of technology innovation, which is really pertinent for the last two business cases. I'm also leading the work for the student services work stream, which consists of the organizations, programs, and services that support the student through their entire educational experience, from applying for admission through to graduation and starting a career. At each university, there's a core set of departments that are responsible for basic services such as admissions, financial aid, course registration and scheduling, and academic advising. And certainly during the discussions in phase one, we could clearly discern the strong commitment to student success that was evident within this function. And we're also very impressed by the different innovative student service programs that were implemented. But we also saw the potential to improve the level of data analytics in this function to support more informed and proactive decision making. So in terms of this function, there are two business cases that are under consideration for phase two, which primarily deal with the admissions process. The first one is focused on the online admissions that are used at each of these universities. So currently each university uses its own application. So if a student wishes to apply to all of the three universities, they have to fill out multiple applications. So the universities could potentially benefit from standardizing on application platforms for students, whether they're in-state, out-of-state, or international students. The second business case that is there is focused more on further increasing the level of automation within the back-end processes for admissions. So taken together, both of these opportunities we think could provide both efficiency and effectiveness benefits. So while standardizing on a common application platform and using an automated back-end process could potentially lead to some technology savings, the real benefit to the universities will really be in increasing student awareness to all of the universities and improving the application experience for your prospective students. So that summarizes the work that we've done within the information technology and the student services streams, and Kelly will lead us through the rest.
Well, we're now at the time that it's your turn. Kelly and Scott over here and Kelly here, will have the microphones. We invite you to come forward to present your questions. Come to the microphones, and we have time to listen. So now is the listening time. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you. My name is Joe Gorton. I'm the president of United Faculty. The United Faculty is the UNI chapter of the American Association of University Professors, and we're the collective bargaining unit for the faculty. And Gayla, although I think there's a certain 19th century charm to the term guild, we're more of a union, but we may change it to a guild. I like that. But first thing I want to say is I want to thank Regent McKibben for his comments acknowledging the faculty and our involvement in the last legislative session. We did put forward some effort, and I think as time goes forward, we're going to try to do so even in a more robust way. But we also want the regents to know that we appreciate your efforts to try to secure a more appropriate budget for you and I. It's a tough political environment to do that in, and we know it and we appreciate it. I also want to thank President Rood for his efforts in that same respect, but also, and for those of you who don't know, I was at the National AAUP meetings last week in which the decision was made to not censure you and I. And I know we're all very happy about that decision, and I just have to say that a large part of that was because of your leadership, President Rood, and it's really appreciated. And I wonder if everyone will just join me briefly in thanking President Rood for. Might not see very many instances in which a union leader asks for a university president to be applauded, but this one is well deserved. AAUP is celebrating our 100th anniversary this year in pursuit of goals of protecting academic freedom and faculty governance and tenure. And our purpose for that has always been, and will be for the next 100 years, I hope, because we believe in a strong, rigorous, vibrant education for all of America's university students, regardless of whether they're attending an elite four-year institution or a small private or public college anywhere in the country. That's what we're all about. And so, we are always going to be, as an organization, always going to be mindful of the possibilities of consequences, be they unintended or intended, regarding academic programs and the quality of academic programs. And I know, Rick, that you know that, and Kayla, you know it. It's mentioned in your proposal. I mean, you anticipate those kind of concerns. But that said, as a leader of our union, I'm not prejudging this efficiency study. Okay, I'm not opposed to efficiency studies. I do organizational analysis in my work and my policy analysis, so I'm not prejudging it at all. In fact, I'd say that although I think the first forum wasn't as much of an open forum as this one is, and I think this is a much better forum, I think that the approach that you have and the emphasis, Rick, on organizational engagement is a really important one. At the sounding board meeting that you and Virginia attended that I was at, I think back in May, I thought that was a very helpful and productive meeting. And so I think that, the pieces are in place, hopefully, to come up with outcomes and recommendations that everyone will be supportive of. Now, the only part that I want to address here today, I can't talk about procurement or any of these other areas, IT, that's not my area, but I do want to make voice a little bit of a concern, not so much of a concern, but an effort to help regarding the academic program analysis. And could you hold this for me, please? So the concern here is that, as we move forward, we have a lot of data collection going on, an enormous amount of data collection across 3 universities in a short period of time. And then we have analytical methods that are going to take place. And I talked about this in the sounding board meeting. Gayla, we had a discussion about it on the phone not long ago. And when I look at the analytical methods, as specified in the proposal at least, we have a strategic cost management model, a business case model, industry standards, quantitative methods, and qualitative methods. What we don't have, and I'm going to actually give a copy of this. What we don't have so far anyway, and this is not to say that it won't happen, is we don't have real detailed specifications of exactly what's happening inside of each of those methods. And that's a concern for me as an analyst, a researcher, a methodologist. And so what I want to say is that as we move into the academic program analysis part of this, I'm really hopeful, I'm very hopeful that each of those methods will be described with some specificity and detail, because I think if they don't, regardless of the recommendations, I think they're going to be subject to very strong criticism. Alternatively, and if we put a more positive, to the extent that those methods are clear and solid and make sense, I think the outcomes are going to have a lot more legitimacy with all of your audiences. So that's all I have to say, and thank you. And Scott, thank you and Deloitte for putting this together. I think this is good. I know we'll be having more, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Joe, if I may, we concur. This is why we need you involved in the working groups, because you cannot in 3 to 5 minutes go into the in-depth discussion of what the methodologies are. But if you are part of the working groups, you are going to be learning these analytical tools, because we want there to be great transparency in terms of what data was looked at, what were the kinds of discussions, what were the options, and how the business cases are built. So, good point, Joe.
I'd be happy to bring the mic around to anybody with the next question.
Hi, my name is Kathy Scholl, and I'm faculty over in Health, Physical Education, and Leisure Services. And I want to thank you for bringing this here for us and explaining it very clearly. I'm wondering, will faculty be invited to all of the different areas or just academic programs? Like there's facilities or classroom scheduling. Will faculty be open to be involved in all areas or just the academic programs?
So just a general thought about that. In the administrative areas, we're going to be working primarily with the folks who do the work. However, part of the analysis always looks at the users. So if it's expense processing, expense report processing process, we'll always be asking about service level, service satisfaction of the user base. And to the extent that that becomes relevant, so we would confirm, that everyone is happy with the service or whatever that might be. But if it does become relevant, we always work that into the approach so that there would be no surprises or changes that faculty would need to respond to that they had no idea that they were even being considered. So our policy is generally no surprises, and I would say that we don't involve faculty when it's not absolutely necessary per se, just to be practical about our time being spent. But we do clearly expect it to be involved in many areas as it's relevant.
I might also add, Kathy, that through President's Cabinet, through AAC, through our normal meetings, that this will be an active, continuous conversation. So we want everybody to be comfortable both ways. So if a staff member is interested or as a user sees something academically, a faculty member sees something as a user administratively, we're not going to necessarily always have specific meetings, but we're going to have an ongoing conversation so that every President's Cabinet, every executive management team, every vice presidential or departmental unit, things can bubble up or trickle down in terms of that conversation, so we'll make sure we cover them.
Other questions? I have one. You've said that somebody else? I'm happy to share my, I'll hold my question. I won't.
I'm Robin Abraham, and I'm a departmental secretary. I have a question. One of the business cases I think you talked about in the student access was distance learning. And one of the things you talked about was that would generate revenue, which I agree. A concern I have is, although it generates revenue, will you also be measuring how well the students learn in that distance learning class as opposed to how well they might be learning in a face-to-face class?
So that's a very good question. On the distance learning, The student that typically pursues a certificate or a degree type program through distance education where you're actually offering more degrees and it's aimed at over age 30 tends to be a different type of student than the student who might during the day be a day student and may choose to do what's a flipped class, where they may choose to take it from their dorm online and not attend class. You have institutional research data that shows that students who are undergraduates, traditional students who are age 18 to 24, who choose to do a flipped class tend not to perform as well as those who go in person. So to answer your question, we're not talking about flipped classes, the traditional student. We are talking about the business person who finished maybe the first 3 years of their university degree and never finished their business degree, but yet need to work on a job, and they know that bachelor's degree would make a difference. We're talking about the working mom who knows if I finish my bachelor's, I too will have more opportunities available to me. So a lot of it's linked to motivation, and the data of non-traditional students who pursue online degrees tend to be more effective. But clearly, that's one reason why I did the strategy map. We've got to monitor the student outcomes. We need to make sure that the pedagogical, the way we deliver the programs are the best way for the best student learning outcomes. Very good question. Did that answer your question?
Yes, I'm just concerned about the traditional students who take the online classes.
Yeah. No, I really, this is to reach a different audience. It's the person who lives in northwestern Iowa, or the soldier who's sometimes here, sometimes overseas, and wants to be able to continue an education. It's also a way to bring Iowa as a beacon of learning to other neighboring states and to the world. So it's really thinking about those students who cannot come full-time, live here, even as beautiful as the city is, but yet want to get their degree.
Rick, you said from the beginning that there are over 175 different opportunities that you've identified, and you've gone through 17 that are being pursued for business cases in phase 2. As an employee looking at the report in detail at my leisure after it's released later today, and I see areas that I might be more impacted by that aren't in the first 17, how do I look at those? Are those items that are going to be pursued at a later time? Are they off the table? What should I think about as far as further opportunities in that regard?
I can start that answer, but maybe Regent McKimmon may want to finish the answer. The only decision that has been made is to select 17 to move forward with. There's been no decision about what to do with the remainder. And it could be they never get touched. It could be a mixture that, for example, there are good ideas that could be easily handed off to the appropriate managers, and they'd be asked to be picking it up, and the campuses take it forward from there. Some of those ideas may involve multiple campuses, and you might need some facilitation and structure to move those kinds of things forward. So that portfolio of ideas has not been discussed yet, but it is on my mental list as to raise to the man next to me as we better start addressing how to deal with this.
Kelly, when we entered into this, and it has gone really quickly, we're only 3.5 or 4 months in. It's my expectation, and I think it's the board's expectation, that this isn't a 6 to 12 months thing, and then we're going to put a 3-ring notebook like I have here up in the file to get dusty. This is an ongoing process, and a process which each university is going to be able to take off of that list some things that are particularly applicable to that university. And we are, obviously, as regents, we hope that you carry the ball at the university level because we can't micromanage all of those things. I think the great thing about the consultants, and the thing that has really excited me, is the depth of the research and the depth of the data collecting that they've done at the respective universities, and how important that is going to be for those individual universities over time. And I think, again, President Rood can follow up a little on that too.
I think the other answer is, Kelly, I would rather see people read it and look at it and see those things that they think are good ideas or good ways in which to change what we do. I think a lot of you will read some of the findings in here, and you'll look at it and say, wow, that's something that I've wanted to do differently for a while. That's something I've wanted to change. Remember what Rick said, 90 of these items are effectiveness, okay? That means, I taught you, everybody in here has heard me talk about subjective efficiency and objective efficiency. Objective efficiency is all about money. Subjective efficiency is all about effectiveness. And those are the things we can do differently, we can do better processing, and potentially might save us money down the road, 5, 10, 15 years. So please understand, as far as I'm concerned, I know the board is, I know Deloitte is, this is still an ongoing conversation. This is analysis. Some things we might look at, it makes all the sense in the world, let's do it. Some things we might look at, it not only doesn't make all the sense in the world, but the numbers don't support it. So just because it's been a suggestion just doesn't mean it's fait accompli. It doesn't mean it's a done deal. So I think we're looking from the executive management team, the president's cabinet, and every individual employee of UNI, is as you read those things that aren't particularly identified in the original 12 business cases, what are those things that we can go ahead and tackle as we're tackling the other operations of the universities and just get better and better and better each day?
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, Kelly. I would be remiss if I didn't say a couple words of thanks and encouragement for your leadership. I'm State Senator Jeff Danielson from this area. It's good to see Mitch, good to see former Senator McKibben, and Mr. President, thank you for your leadership here on the campus. It would be probably a stretch to say that UNI has seen some hard times, right, in the past few years in terms of budgeting and some of the things that have been expected. We have, and we hope that the report reflects some of those changes that have already gone on. I didn't see any sort of historical analysis. But keep in mind, the universities were asked to cut $25 million in the 09-010 budget year after the recession, and then there were also program cuts here even more recently. What I like about this effort, and I want to thank you for your leadership, is that it encourages positive reinforcement. If you look at the overall number figure that was used here today, 30 to 80 million in savings, what I do like is that savings is a reward. It's going to go back to the universities to help as we go forward. Although I'd be interested to see how that's going to be allocated, if there's a way to add more detail to that later. Keep in mind that people are very sensitive to the funding formulas that the three universities are subject to today. There's a separate task force that provided some leadership on how to make those changes in the future. But the universities themselves will be sensitive to that macro figure. How is that actually allocated back to the universities? Another point of information that I was hoping to learn today, and this is more than just a passing interest for me. I'm vice chair of appropriations in the Senate and have led the state's own efficiency efforts over the last 4 years. Today we save about $300 million annually, primarily through IT changes and personnel changes. But I heard some dollar figures referenced to some of these ideas, but I don't see them in the actual report. It would be awesome if later you could fill in some of those blanks. What got my particular attention was the large dollar figures in the IT portion. I actually believe that there are those kind of savings out there because we've shown it at the state level, and we exempted the Regents universities when we made our own effort. So hopefully going forward we can actually see dollar figures attached to these ideas. And if you weren't prepared to put them out today, I can understand that, but I did hear a couple of the presenters actually use dollar figures, so if they're available, it'd be nice to have them. And then, again, I just want to thank Senator McKibben's leadership. Change is always difficult. You know that, Senator, when we work together. And I've got both more gray hairs and have lost considerable religion in my own Senate experience for some of the same concepts that you're talking about, having led some of those efforts in the Senate. And I just want to acknowledge your professionalism and the fact that you have engaged a lot of the stakeholders. To me, that's the only way these efforts are successful. stakeholders must be involved and must understand what that means going forward. So in some sense, some thanks, but also some more information on the dollar figures would be helpful.
I can make a comment on that just to reinforce some points made earlier. The 30 to 80 is, yes, it's a buildup of the 12 that you heard about. And each team lead mentioned their numbers for their area, 1 to 5 million, 6 to 10, whatever the numbers were. And that does add up to 30 to 80. It is not in the written report, and partly there's a reason for that. We know from experience that even the ranges that we are estimating this early in the process get adjusted as you find new information, as you have discussions about alternative ways to make adjustments, and there's some give and take in those discussions. And sometimes the range is exceeded, and sometimes they fall short, and sometimes they even get killed because maybe we were misinformed, maybe it isn't practical given some other interaction with some other plan the university has that we weren't aware of. There's lots of reasons why the portfolio of the 12 may not remain fully intact as we have it today 12 weeks from now, and we know this from experience. So the 30 to 80 we're putting out there as an aggregate. Why? Because it's safer, because some may go up, some may go down, and maybe you might drop one. But 30 to 80 is still an okay thing to say. So that's why we're saying it that way now. But the purpose of the next 12 weeks of phase 2 is to have those very specific numbers. And maybe even come back and say, well, we looked at 3 alternatives, and here's the cost benefit of each. And here's why we chose the one that doesn't produce the most savings. Because there's an implementation reason for it. There's an adoption reason for it. There's a practicality reason for it, perhaps. So that's the kind of output that will be coming at the end of phase 2. Much better numbers and more logic for why it is the way it is. And we don't know what the total will be because it is going to be subject to change for the process that is planned to occur through phase 2.
Thank you, Senator, for your comments. Also, thank you to the legislature, both the House and the Senate, for the work that you did this year to keep our tuition flat again for the second year in a row, and budgeting and recognizing that the regents, the universities, we're going to meet the legislature halfway in the years to come, and we need that additional support, and we'll work to, as you can see here, we're going to work to meet you there. So thank you for what you've done.
Yeah, as a follow-up, thank you, Larry. I appreciate that. As a follow-up, how do you, first of all, I guess it's kind of this 2 questions that are very similar. Do you need legislative approval for any of these items? And also, how do you prevent the legislature from looking at that $30 to $80 million savings and then attempting to reduce the overall region's budget? I think you know what that scenario is like. So give me some sense that while we may not be able to avoid that conversation, that there'll be some leadership exerted so that people don't try to go there.
I'll answer the second one first. I depend on you to take care of that for us. Then I'll go back to the first one. What we're doing is within the statutory purview of the regents in terms of its management function of the 3 state universities. And the thing that I am most excited about, and the thing that has bothered me the most as I've gotten into this, is the high level of student debt that's come out of our state universities. We're the 6th highest in the nation. That is too high. We will continue to make the case that we'll have efficiencies. We will repurpose the dollars at the university level. That's going to be up to the president here and the faculty and the leadership team at UNI. But we hope at the end of the day, our customers, who are the students, are going to be and the families are going to be the real beneficiaries of the work we do as regents and you do as a legislator.
I'd just like to make one small addition comment here. Of the 30 to 80, and why it isn't something to immediately be acted upon and saying, because you said 30 to 80, we're cutting your budget by X amount, has to do with timing. I mean, in addition to the amount variability, which I just talked about. But there's a timing variability. and a timing clarity that is needed. And that is also the purpose of phase 2, and that's why we're talking about putting it into the implementation plan and the, what do we call it, the roadmap. That roadmap lays out, and it will be clear that, for example, if you need to install a new computer system to take over something that's done manually today, making that up as an example, there's time to go do that. There's time to choose the system. There's time to code it appropriately. There's time to train managers what needs to be done about it. There's time to train people who are going to do key entry strokes into it. There's time to train managers on how to read the reports that come out of it to make the decisions. And only then do you do it the new way, and that's when the savings might start to occur if there's savings associated with it, or the effectiveness improvement kicks in. So you can see by that example, simple example, but the timing here is critical. And it could easily take, in some areas, 1 to 2 years. It's going to take at least a number of months in almost every area from the time you decide, hey, this is cool, we did the analysis, we got to go do this, we all agree, let's shake hands and go forward, to the time it actually is being done the new way will be months later, okay? So the timing will be absolutely critical. And the purpose of the effort was to re-energize the universities to fulfill their mission. And at the same time, I've heard discussions of intent for more strategic planning. And I think you're going to find that when you go through such an exercise, you're going to be looking for resources to fund all those initiatives you want to do to be competitive and to perform well. So that it will fly in the face of the future success of Iowa universities by simply cutting the budget. Just an outside opinion.
One last call for any final questions. All right, then I would one final wrap up. If after you've thought about what you've heard today, after you've had a chance to take a look at the report, for anybody who comes up with any follow-up questions, would continue to invite and encourage you to use the opportunity on our webpage to submit those questions or follow-up suggestions that you might have as you're looking at the different opportunities. So, thank you.
I want to thank everybody for coming, Regent Dakovich, Regent McKibben, Deloitte team, and the internal team. Thank you very much. Know this is an ongoing effort. Know there's going to be a lot of input and conversation, and we will continue that very actively over the next 6 to 12 months. Thanks, everybody.
And thank you for the questions.